Are you a headline reader? Well, here's a couple for you. The National Association of Realtors this week announced its National Homeownership Month, and Fannie Mae released the May Monthly Home Purchase Sentiment Index report with the headline, Home Buying Sentiment Hits New Survey Low. Let's take a look this week and see if we can make some sense of this headline. Hey there, it's Les Solgrove. This is Simply Des Moines Market Values Week 24. And as I mentioned, it's National Home Ownership Month. It is logical that June is that month with everybody out of school and vacation starting. It's time to focus on home ownership for the general public out there. So let's see what is all about this other headline. So um, kind of an interesting topic here this week. We're going to talk a little bit about Fannie Mae and their release of this monthly home purchase sentiment index. It comes out every month. It was released June 7th and it had quite the headline. But before we get into that, this report, just to set this up, we're going to compare the Fannie Mae report compared to what I collect and apply it locally here. So Fannie Mae surveys about a little over 1,000 members. In fact, this time it was 1,027 household financial decision makers. And basically, there's a margin of error of plus or minus 4%. And this survey is asked or is completed by people who are 18 years and older. And it was between May 1st and May 17th. And some of these people are homeowners, some of these people are home buyers, some are basically just sitting out there on the sidelines. But it's a national survey and it's a pretty good one. And the link to this survey is below here. It's also in the show notes or in the comment section down below. I do encourage you to download this and look at it. At first glance, if you look at the headlines, it can look a little bit scary, but we're going to make some sense out of it this week. So here's that headline again: Home buying sentiment hits survey new survey low, and this is again this purchase sentiment index is showing basically a number that's assigned every single month when they do this. And this month's survey index came in at 69.4 on the scale. And how they come up with this number is basically they ask 5 or 6 different questions during this survey period. And they ask questions about buying conditions, selling conditions, um, home pricing over the next 12 months, what somebody feels is going to happen in pricing, mortgage rate outlook over the next 12 months, job loss concerns over the next 12 months, and then looking back 12 months, has there been a change in household income? And so they compile all these analytics together, and this is how they come up with that survey. And one thing that they're quick to point out, even though they have a kind of a catching headline there, is that the HPSI, this home purchase sentiment index, is actually increased over a year ago, 65.6 a year ago compared to 69.4 this May. And yes, it's down from last month, but I think that's just basically what we're seeing in the marketplace. We're seeing this uncertainty in a lot of areas. So no surprise that the index came down this past month, but we're still well ahead of where we were a year ago. So let's kind of take a look at some of the categories here that is featured in this survey. And this is, by the way, this information here, this graphic, anytime you see this down here, data source Fannie Mae, came from the Fannie Mae Home Purchase Sentiment Monthly Index dated May 28th. So these are not my numbers here. These numbers right down here, or uh, the legend is down here in the lower left-hand corner. And this data comes from Fannie Mae. This is not my data. I basically brought it into a format that will fit my show here. But the question they asked this past month, which they continuously ask, is it a good time, if you're a home buyer, is this a good time to buy or a bad time to buy? And this is probably one of the places where the headline really got caught fire here. Only 14% of the respondents are saying that it is a good time to buy. And, there's a lot of frustration, some discouragement, maybe a little pessimism out there amongst today's home buyers. Um, but 14% is a low number. Now, does that mean that people are just going to stop buying? No, home buyers are going to buy regardless of whether it's a good time or a bad time. In many situations, you have families getting, people getting married and buying and combining households or buying their first home. We have transfers, we have divorces, we have deaths. So there's all kinds of reasons why, um, people buy and sell in any general market. Now, 14% is the number. 86% said it's a bad time to buy. Um, let's just let that lay. I mean, that's what the survey said. Again, it's 1,024, something like that members or people surveyed. So it's not a huge pool, but it's enough that gets a good sampling of the sentiments. If we ask the same question on the selling side, is it a good time to sell a home? The outlook is much better. 64% this past month said it was a good time to sell, while 35% said it was a bad time to sell. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that homeowners are sitting there thinking, yeah, I'll sell my home if I can get what I want. We're going to talk a minute about price. But I think it's always a good time to sell your home, especially in a market where there's limited inventory. And so it's no surprise to see that the number of homeowners that are sitting out there consider that this is a good time to sell, and that's always pretty much going to pretty much always be the case. So it's basically almost 2/3 yes and 1/3 no. It's not a good, saying it's not a good time to sell. How this applies in our local market here, I just wanted to show you the pricing when we're talking about that. This is median sale price, and you can kind of see that this scale here along the top, the black dashed lines as always is last year's numbers. And we've been ahead of last year's median sale price so far this year in the red columns here. But we are, number one, we're very, very close to where we were last year. And also, if you look at what typically happens, home sale prices overall tend to come back down very, very slightly as the year comes along. So really, maybe by next week, we'll be logically hitting our year-to-date peak, and then after that, we'll see pricing kind of slow down just a little bit. Um, you know, we are, um, again, this is all homes in the median sale price. If we look at just existing homes, you can kind of see this same trend. We're still pretty much, again, ahead of last year, although this past week was almost right on track with where we were a year ago. And we are, again, just like I said, we're pretty much right at our seasonal peak. So it'll be interesting to watch this to see as we move forward, if this has any effect in the future market. So. One of the other questions they asked here in the survey, and this is back to the Fannie Mae survey, what do you feel is the price outlook for the next 12 months? Do you feel like home prices are going to go up? Do you feel like they're going to go down or stay about the same? And by far, the people that they surveyed pretty much felt like home prices were either going to go up or stay the same. Right about that 41% average there of those two responses, that home prices were either going to go up or stay the same. Only 18% felt like pricing was going to go down. And I think that's probably one of the most logical answers that anybody could give is, if you're a home buyer answering this question, you're probably going to say that you don't feel like prices are going to go down. If you're a home seller or a homeowner sitting on the sidelines, you're probably going to be more optimistic. So that's probably a pretty good number. You can see that that's kind of been the trend all year long, although there's been some, stay the same has changed a little bit from the go up. But for the most part, these two categories have been kind of hand in hand throughout the year. As far as what we feel like pricing is going to do at the local level, now this is back to my data, you can see that our median list price, so these are the price of homes, not the homes that went under contract or that have sold. This is the current inventory out there. We have been actually below overall, under last year's median list prices. And, we peaked out last year right around that $375,000 price point for the most part. And then as we got into week 27, which was that second week in July, we started to see that pricing go back down. And that's kind of, again, there's that cycle ramping up through the spring and summer months, and then as we get towards the 1st of July, it starts to tail off again. I think we're going to probably see something very similar to that, but the interesting part is, or at least overall, we are considerably behind. At least the past couple of weeks, we've been somewhat behind, maybe 10,000 or close to $10,000 behind in list pricing. So how this looks with the existing home, where most of the sales are, um, the people out there with a home on the market that's not a new construction property, they feel like maybe they are still in the driver's seat for pricing when it comes to being a seller. So therefore, existing home prices are up a little bit. So what's dragging this number down is probably new construction, and the condo townhome market is probably driving this number down overall. But as far as existing home sales, list pricing, we appear to have peaked. We've been pretty steady around that 355,000 to 360,000 price point for the last several weeks, and expect that to maybe drop or stay the same until we get through July, and then that number will go back down as we get toward the end of the year. So any change from these variants that we see from the normal, obviously we'll see these each week when we pick this up and try to figure out what's causing that. But that's what I expect to happen moving forward. The next question by the Fannie Mae survey here was, um, if you're planning to make a move, do you feel like you would buy or you would rent? And this is that age-old question: is it better to buy or is it better to rent in any environment? And by far, about two-thirds, two to one anyway, two-thirds of the respondents said that, hey, it would be better for me to buy in this environment versus renting. And that's been pretty typical going back in time. This survey that they do goes back as far as May. And you can see that, about a little over 30%, not quite a third, said that they would consider renting versus buying. And some of that rent consideration may be due to the fact that there's not as many homes out there for them to buy in their price point, or maybe it's affordability. However, obviously rent pricing is up right now. That's not a question they asked, but is it cheaper to rent than it is to buy? And I think in the long run, I think you can argue that it's cheaper to buy if you can get into something without a large down payment. And that's kind of the challenge right now. Is the economy on track or the right track? This is another question from the Fannie Mae survey. And I don't try to get very political in these things, and we're not going to talk about administrations, but you can see that the majority of the people surveyed felt like the economy is on the wrong track and has been at least since last May. However, I put the linear, the trending lines here on these two different graphics, and ever so slightly, you can see that it is trending downward. So the wrong track is actually not being the answer most of the time. Well, it is most of the time, but it's getting lesser answered that direction. I can't even say what I'm trying to say here, but it's tracking downward very, very slightly, and it's tracking up that it's the right time to buy very, very slowly on the blue line at the very bottom. There's no doubt that public sentiment is that the economy is tough right now, and that's probably what's driving this. And we will, again, I'll try to watch this survey each month when it comes out, and if we see any changes, it'll be interesting once we get around November, December, and early next year to see if this sentiment changes. But we'll at least have this data going back at least to May that they've provided, and then I'll keep it updated from here. The next question they ask is obtaining a mortgage today easy or difficult? And when they ask two questions, and that's the only two questions you have, it's like basically a yes and no question. You can see that the responses are polar opposites of each other. So when someone says it's becoming very, very difficult, then the easy solution at the very bottom there is the totally opposite, equaling exactly 100% in this case. We've seen interest rates rise in the last 3 or 4 weeks prior to this last 2 weeks. And so that's probably why we saw it's becoming more difficult to buy as interest rates were on the rise. Now, this last couple of weeks, we've seen our mortgage interest rates drop, and I'll show you that graphic here in a minute. So I would suspect that when this survey was taken in mid-May, those 2 weeks of drops had not occurred yet. So therefore, they felt like it was more difficult to buy. So as we move into June, if we continue to see additional rate cuts, even though it might be slow or slight, I think we'll see this number come back down again next time this survey is taken. So we'll watch that one as that survey comes out. So speaking of mortgage rates, they asked the question is to these respondents, do you feel as though moving forward that mortgage interest rates are going to go up? Are they going to go down? Or do you feel like they're going to stay the same? And so let's just do the overlay here. You can see that, again, over time, you can see that the sentiment from about November to January was that they didn't feel like mortgage interest rates were going to go up as much as they felt it back in late fall of last year. And if you remember what happened last year, mortgage interest rates most of the year were on the rise in 2023. And it wasn't until we got into November we saw a pretty good drop of mortgage interest rates. And so that's probably what you're seeing here is this November to December drop, pretty major, and then December to January drop again. Then we got to the first of the year and we started to see mortgage interest rates come back up. And so, home buyers being asked this question, we're going, well, rates are going up. I assume they're going to continue to go up. So that's probably why they answered that question. So what we're seeing here, though, is that that sentiment has dropped just a little bit. It's just 31% as of this last month's question. So let's overlay the answer to the question, do we feel that interest rates are going to go down? And again, dynamically, you can see that in October, November, when interest rates were going down, um, you know, they continued to feel like, well, if they're going down, they must be going to continue to go down. Therefore, this question got a higher score as going down. And then as interest rates kind of leveled off, they kind of dropped back off again. And the sentiment was not as strong that interest rates were going to continue to go down. And so currently we're sitting at 25% of the respondents thinking that rates are going to go down. So that's 25% of the market right now, or of the respondents right now, feel like rates will go lower, and three-fourths, well, less than three-fourths, because we're going to see this last overlay here that says stay the same. And what you see here is that this sentiment is rising. It's 42% of the answers here. And if you look at this from a logical perspective, if mortgage interest rates are stabilizing, then that might very well be why people are answering this question stay the same. If they're stabilizing, then that number is going to continue to go up. So ideally, we'd like to see the mortgage rates go down, and then this red line would go up and indicate that that's building confidence in there. So basically, the rest of this 42% feel like interest rates have leveled off. So looking at my graphics, this is the 2024 weekly mortgage rates, and I've categorized it across the bottom in this particular time by month, just so you get an idea of instead of by week. Here again, you can see that mortgage interest rates have been on the rise for a majority of this year. We would have a period of time where it's fairly stable. Then we had 3 weeks of a pretty good rise, and then a couple of down weeks, another week up, 3 or 4 weeks, or 5 or 6 weeks on the rise. This was probably the toughest time in April, right when we were starting to get into the spring market. We had 6 weeks or 5 weeks of period where mortgage interest rates rose continually week over week. We're currently sitting at 6.95%, which is two weeks in a row that we've seen interest rates drop, and they've both been under that 7% interest rate. And so that's probably a good sign. So that gives us some additional buying power, our buyers out there, some additional buying power. And this is the last graphic of the show this week. You'll notice a couple things here. You got 2 little green diamonds going up and 2 little yellow diamonds going down. This is the minimum and maximum buying power during the year. So the best time, the most amount of money when interest rates were as low as they were, this was the best time to be a home buyer. That $2,000 principal and interest payment, not including taxes and insurance, would fund a $313,000 mortgage. Whereas of the lowest point when interest rates were at their highest just 6 weeks ago, that same $2,000 payment only funds $294,000. So what I do like to see is that this is kind of generally moving upward. And if we can cross over last year's numbers here, so if we get across this solid black line, that's where the buying power line was last year. If we can do that for the rest of the year, it would be wonderful to say, buying a home in our marketplace the second half of 2024, you had more buying power than you had all of last year from July or mid-July on. So that's really, I'm hoping that mortgage interest rates continue to drop. Will we see them go down to that 6%? Probably. If so, it won't be until very, very end of year. The election's coming too, so we're going to kind of see what the presidential election kind of has to do with the economy and how mortgage interest rates are viewed. So anyway, that is the show. A little different take this week. Again, I tried something different. I like to look at other reports and incorporate those into our marketplace and kind of feel for what's going on nationally and in different industries and different aspects of our industry, and see how it kind of plays out. So that's the show this week. We'll see you all again next week. We're about 2 weeks away from end of June, which will also be end of month and end of quarter, all on the last day of the month, which is the June 30th, which is also a Sunday. So it's going to be busy here in a couple of weeks for me. We'll come back in 2 weeks with quarterly data, and next week we'll be back with kind of a final general overview of how the market's done so far this year, and we'll tackle the end of quarter when we get to it here. So thanks again for joining me. This is Les Solgrove with DesMoinesMarketValues.com. All the graphics are available at that URL, as well as all the previous videos. So thanks for joining me, and we'll see you all again next week.